I talk to Jordan Peterson fans all the time, and they often say things to me like, well, I don't agree with everything Jordan Peterson has to say about religion, but when it comes to free speech, he's right on. And they often regale me with tales about how in Canada they're going to force people to say pronouns against their will. They're going to compel your speech. Transgender activists and leftists are going to force everybody to say these silly pronouns, and if you don't say them, they're going to put you in jail. And Dr. Jordan Peterson bravely stood up against them. He almost lost his job. He's a hero, a brave free speech warrior that is one of the few that is standing between us and the lefties sending us all to the gulag. The only thing is, that's not actually true. It never fucking happened. The entire thing was a manufactured controversy. And this is the reason Dr. Jordan Peterson became famous to begin with. So to understand why many of us old schoolers oppose Dr. Jordan Peterson, I think a great place to start is to examine how his meteoric rise to cult-like status happened to begin with. So real quick, to understand this, we have to go back a few years. What is now known as the skeptic community sprung up on YouTube. Back in the day, the entire point of it was to challenge bad ideas. Mostly religion and the conservatism that fueled religion. And it was awesome. We kicked the shit out of religion. Well, fast forward a couple years and shit changed. Let's face it, people love to hate on other people. It makes us feel better about ourselves. It releases pleasurable chemicals in our brain and just makes us feel good. Unfortunately, the YouTube audience began to grow bored with videos making fun of religion, and they wanted something shiny and new to hate. And a few far-left idiots stepped up and gave them exactly what they wanted. Before you knew it, videos about social justice warriors became all the trend. Most of the big skeptic channels and most of the new skeptic channels completely abandoned attacking bad ideas regardless of who said them, and they began to focus on milking this trend. Most of them became cookie-cutter channels who went out and sorted through the minutia on the left to find the worst of the worst from the craziest people on the far left, nut-picked them, and then presented them to their audience as though they represented the mainstream left when they in no way did. In fact, so many of these videos were made year after year that it caused what I call social justice warrior hysteria. People began to see the left as the greatest threat on the entire planet. Even though the right took over all three branches of government, even though they own most state legislatures, even though they own most state governorships, even though the right pretty much runs fucking everything, it didn't matter. The narrative shifted to the fact that these blue-haired college kids were the greatest threat on the planet. And it was in this atmosphere that Jordan Peterson rose to stardom. You see, Jordan Peterson is not new to the internet. Jordan Peterson has been posting his videos on the internet for years and years and years and trying to build up a following. He has been attempting to draw attention to himself for an incredibly long time. Until recently, nobody really took him seriously. When he posted videos, yeah, he had a few supporters, but the vast majority of the crowd either found him laughable or not interesting enough to pay very much attention to. But that all changed with the rise of social justice warrior hysteria on YouTube. You see, Dr. Jordan Peterson is actually a really smart dude. He understands exactly how to take advantage of this opportunity. Hell, he even went on the Joe Rogan show and bragged about it.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to because it's just so goddamn funny. I can't help but say it. I figured out how to monetize social justice warriors.
He found a way to monetize social justice warriors, which is really not that hard to do. It's something I've been talking about for years and years and years. It's one of the main reasons I lost a giant percentage of my audience and income because I refused to jump on that trend. I personally don't believe the left is the most dangerous thing on the planet, far from it. And regardless of how much money and fame I would make for saying so, I just can't do that. But there are many, many, many people who have no problem doing that. And that's why all these cookie cutter YouTube channels popped up to take advantage of this. So how did Peterson take advantage of this? Well, he did so by misrepresenting Canadian Bill C16, which simply added transgender people to the human rights code of groups you're not allowed to discriminate against. Simply put, the law amends the Canadian Human Rights Act by adding gender identity or expression as a prohibited grounds of discrimination. That makes it illegal to deny services, employment, accommodation, and similar benefits to individuals based on their gender identity or gender expression within a federal regulated industry. A person who denies benefit because of the gender identity or gender expression of another person could be liable to provide monetary reimbursement. This prohibition would only apply to matters with federal jurisdiction. So basically, you're not allowed to discriminate against people because they're black. That was already on the books. You're not allowed to discriminate against people because they're disabled. That was already on the books. You're not allowed to discriminate against people because of their sex or because they're gay. That was already on the books. So all they did was add gender identity and gender expression to this. You can't discriminate against somebody simply because they're transgender. That's what Bill C16 did. Well, Jordan Peterson began making a series of videos where he began misrepresenting Bill C16. And I know a lot of you Jordan Peterson fans are not going to believe me about this because you watched so many skeptic channels unquestioningly spread Peterson's narrative without challenging it whatsoever. People just simply can't believe that all these skeptic channels would push Peterson's narrative if it was not true. But what you have to understand about these channels is they are no longer about spreading the truth. The entire point of these channels now is to spread their narrative that the left is evil, crazy, and the biggest threat to the world currently. And Peterson's misrepresentation of Bill C16 fits into their narrative perfectly. It does exactly what they want to do. It gives them anti-social justice weird content to make, to rile up their fans, and to give them their daily dose of something to hate. Truth be damned. But here, let me show you how Peterson misrepresented this. This is actually one of the claims he made about it.
You can now provisionally be prosecuted under the hate crime legislation federally for criticizing someone's choice of fashion. And I'm not being cynical about that.
Complete utter bullshit. Absolutely not true. Peterson began to go in public and make all these outlandish claims about what these liberal and transgender activists were trying to do. He either purposely or through his own paranoia completely misrepresented the whole thing to make it seem like people were going to be forced to say things they didn't want to say. Compelled speech. But this was never the case. In fact, due to Peterson's misrepresentation of the bill, the Canadian Bar Association, which is the most trusted legal body in all of Canada, actually had to come out and write a letter debunking the things Peterson was claiming. This is from the Canadian Bar Association, and they said, "Recently the debate has turned to whether the amendments will force individuals to embrace concepts which they find objectionable. This is a misunderstanding of human rights and hate crimes legislation. For hate crimes, Bill C16 adds gender identity and expression to the identifiable groups protected from those who advocate genocide, publicly incite hatred likely to lead to a breach of the peace, or willfully promote hatred against them. The Supreme Court of Canada found subsection 319(2), willful promotion of hatred, to be a narrowly confined offense, which suffers from neither overbreadth nor vagueness. The provision possesses a stringent mens rea requirement, necessitating either an intent to promote hatred or knowledge of the substantial certainty of such, and is also strongly supported by the conclusion that the meaning of the word hatred is restricted to the most severe and deeply felt form of opprobrium." They also went on to explain, "For those compelled to speak and act in truth, however unpopular, truth is included in those defenses. Nothing in the section compels the use or avoidance of particular words in the public as long as they are not used in their most extreme manifestations with the intention of promoting the level of abhorrence and delegitimization and rejection that produces feelings of hatred against identifiable groups. Those concerned that they could be criminalized for the repugnant or offensive ideas fail to understand a crucial distinction in the law, as the Supreme Court of Canada has explained." So basically, according to the legal experts in Canada, they are not compelling you to say anything. So no, this is not compelled speech. They are not forcing you to say pronouns if you don't want to, and you would not be fined in jail simply for accidentally mislabeling somebody. And here's the craziest part. These laws have already been on the books in all of Canada for years. In fact, where Jordan Peterson lives, this law has already been on the book for 5 years. See, Canada has territories which are similar to states in the United States. And in every one of these territories, this was already the law. All Bill C16 did was make it federally the law. These same exact statutes have been on the books in Ontario, Canada, where Jordan Peterson lives and teaches, for 5 years now. And not once in 5 years has anybody been affected the way Jordan Peterson claims they would be. In fact, it has already been the law in certain parts of Canada for 15 years, and not one single person's speech has been compelled to call a transgender person anything against their will. And this law has already been federally in place in all of Canada for over a year, Once again, not a single person treated the way Jordan Peterson claimed they would be. Clearly, the facts suggest that this is not the imminent problem Jordan Peterson claimed it was. According to the most trusted legal body in Canada, he misrepresented this entire issue. And he did it in order to paint himself as a victim. He basically came out, misrepresented the law, and then played the victim like somebody was trying to force him to do something that no one was actually trying to force him to do. Once again, the law had already been in effect for 5 years where he lived, and it had never affected him in any way whatsoever. But suddenly he saw an opportunity to put himself in the spotlight, to paint himself as the victim, a hero who's going to stand up against these evil lefties. So then he went public and started saying if the law was passed, he was not going to obey this law. He was going to break the law. So obviously this freaked out the lawyers at the school he worked at. As you can imagine, makes perfect sense. One of your employees stands up and says they're going to disobey a law. If somebody sues him because he disobeyed that law, the whole school could be on the hook for it. So the school sent him a letter that basically said, we respect your free speech, but we're not with you on this one. Just to give themselves a little breathing room in case there was a lawsuit. But of course, Peterson and all these skeptic channels used this as proof that Peterson was being targeted for his free speech, that all these evil SJWs were trying to get him fired for no other reason than he was speaking out against an injustice they were trying to push upon him. But that's not actually what happened at all. He was simply painting himself as the victim here. So, as you might can imagine, as Peterson went out and misrepresented what this law does to his mostly conservative audience, it created a backlash against transgender people. You can prove this to yourself by simply going to Twitter search and searching Bill C16 and trans or Bill C16 and transgender and look through the messages over the last year and a half and see just how much hate has been pushed on transgender people because of this. And it didn't just happen on Twitter either. It happened on YouTube. It happened on message boards, all of Reddit. Dr. Jordan Peterson's misrepresentation had a direct negative effect on transgender people. So needless to say, this upset quite a number of students that attend the same school Jordan Peterson does. Many of them felt like he was no longer a good representation of the school. They paid dues to go to that school. They're in essence clients of the school, and they believed his misrepresentations, whether intentional or just because he's a conspiracy kook, did not represent the school in a way they wanted to be associated with. So they did exactly what is their right to do. They protested him, which obviously they have the right to do. Protest is one of the keystones of free speech. And I'm sure, no doubt, there were some crazy far leftists who misbehaved towards Peterson. I'm sure a lot of them were idiots, but there were also plenty of them that actually had very good reasons to oppose Peterson and not want him to be at the school anymore. But of course, Peterson used this again to paint himself as the victim, and most of the skeptic channels went right along with him. And the narrative became, this is just a bunch of crazy social justice warriors who just want to shut him down for his free speech. He's this hero free speech warrior, and these evil lefties are trying to get rid of him over it. And that's the narrative that most of his fans are aware of. Now, you guys may disagree with me. You may think this law is vague and somehow might lead to these things that Jordan Peterson claims they will. But ask yourself this question. How come Peterson and all these skeptic channels that supported him never gave you the other side of the story? How come they never mentioned to you guys that the Canadian Bar Association already came out and debunked what he was saying? How come they never mentioned that these laws were already in place for 5 years where he lived before Bill C16 was even passed? How come they never told you about the concerns of the students who actually had legitimate reasons for wanting Jordan Peterson removed? Well, it's very simple. They're not about the truth anymore. They're about their narrative. They're about spreading social justice warrior hysteria, and the facts do not fit their narrative. And yes, before anybody brings up the Lindsay Shepherd situation and claims the Lindsay Shepherd situation has somehow proved Jordan Peterson was correct, this is bullshit. Basically, Lindsay was a teacher's aide who got in trouble for showing a Jordan Peterson video in the classroom. And she recorded these two leftist idiots berating her about it. And they misrepresented Bill C16 to her in much the same way Jordan Peterson misrepresents Bill C16 to people. But the facts of the matter is, just because they misrepresented the bill to her in the same way Jordan Peterson misrepresents the bill, that doesn't mean Jordan Peterson's right. That just means they're all wrong. The facts of the matter is, Lindsay Shepherd was not charged under Bill C16 because she in no way violated Bill C16. If anything, the Lindsay Shepard situation proves Jordan Peterson is not right. Because if he was right, she would have been charged under Bill C16, which she wasn't, right? Anyway, the whole thing is rather depressing. Even people like Sam Harris, who are supposed to be the best among us, haven't even bothered to research any of this before he had Jordan Peterson on his show. He basically says he agrees with Jordan Peterson on all this free speech stuff. He didn't challenge him at all on it. And neither did Bill Maher when Bill Maher had him on. Bill Maher basically just sucked his dick. It was incredibly shameful. So anyway, this is how Jordan Peterson got the attention he had been so desperately seeking for many years. And it obviously worked better than he had ever imagined. Obviously, he had no idea that all these anti-social justice warrior channels would jump on his bandwagon and just spread his narrative without challenging him in any way whatsoever. Obviously, the whole thing snowballed beyond his wildest dreams. And of course, a lot of it is because he's a really smart person, very skilled at psychology and knows how to take advantage of these situations. But anyway, that's a brief rundown on how Jordan Peterson became famous to begin with. Hopefully, I've given you guys a perspective on this that the other skeptic channels didn't bother to. This is my second Jordan Peterson video, and I plan on doing several others. He is just wrong on so many different levels that it's gonna take multiple videos just to break it all down step by step. But I thought a good place to start would be explaining how he became popular to begin with. And whether you agree with me or not, at least now you know the other side of the story. As always, I love you guys, and until next time, logic. Fuck yes. Hey guys, Dusty Smith here, and thanks to the adpocalypse, now almost all of my videos are demonetized. I'm pretty much only making money off my videos now through a Patreon account. And for those of you who don't know, we set up an animal sanctuary here in Mississippi for rescued animals, the Humanist Society of Mississippi Animal Sanctuary, where we try to spread humanism and secularism throughout the South by doing good deeds. So if you can afford to, even $1 or $2 helps. We're doing some good work here, and it's all because of you. Thanks, guys.